Hello, everybody. It's been quite a long time since I touched this channel. There's a few reasons for that. I I just wasn't satisfied with my first video. It took a long time and it just didn't come out that great. Mainly it's because you can tell I was reading off of a script and the music wasn't very good. It wasn't the best video. Now I decided I want to try to be more natural, and the main reason I'm coming back is because I've had this real deck building itch. I've been wanting to build a lot of decks. But of course, I can't put them all together at once. So I'm going to try to make all of these videos as a way for me to sort of get that itch out and let you all see it. First, we're going to start with one of the first commanders I ever played against, actually. It is Zurgo Helmsmasher. If you've never seen him before, here he is. Zurgo Helmsmasher, 2 white red, 7/2 with haste. Zurgo Helmsmasher must attack each combat if able. He is indestructible as long as it's your turn, and whenever a creature dealt damage by Zurgo Helmsmasher this turn dies, put a ++1 counter on Zurgo Helmsmasher. So this is an old school commander, was really popular for a long time, and as I said, he was one of the first ones I ever played against when I first started in I want to say about early 2018. And, he loves to attack, obviously. He has to do it every turn. And people would usually do the Voltron strategy. Because he's indestructible on their turn, they would play a lot of board wipes, and of course there's World Slayer. That was always classic to see. And yeah, that's understandable. But I wanted to try to do something a little more interesting with him. At first, it was a little hard to decide on because he's one of those commanders where you look at him and he tells you basically everything you want him doing. So it's hard to go in any other direction with him. It's kind of like Marin, where obviously you're playing a graveyard deck. It seems really difficult to do anything interesting with him. But I have found a way, and that way is focused more on his last ability, that Zurgo Helmsmasher gets a ++1 counter for each creature he dealt damage to dies. That is what I wanted to focus on, and that's when I had the light bulb moment. Instead of trying to get through for commander damage, why don't I want to have my opponent's creatures blocking? So that's what I went with. I went with a forced blocks strategy. This is something that's usually in green. In fact, these are called lure effects based on the enchantment Lure, which is a green card, obviously. There's a little bit of it in Mardu, enough to make the deck, I would say, and that's why I made it, but it is a little interesting in the fact that it's sort of off color, because again, green is what's doing this the most. I do have a few effects that do work really good for the deck. First off, the best card for this strategy in these colors is easily Nemesis Mask. Just equip. Everything has to block the creature if able. Easily the best card in this deck. Definitely warrants a few equipment tutors, I would say, just to get it. Brutal Horde Chief's a pretty good one. Not only is he dealing extra damage whenever we attack, but his activated ability not only makes all creatures block if able, but we can choose how those creatures block. So if we are attacking with multiple creatures, we can throw all of them under Zurgo, or maybe even put them somewhere else. Like maybe if for some reason you want something to block your Brutal Horde Chief. I don't know what, but it's something you could do. Odric Master Tactician, basically the same thing, but slightly better, because you can also choose if a creature blocks this turn at all. So you can choose everything to block if you want, but if there's something you don't want blocking, just say, hey, that creature's not blocking this turn. He honestly might be the best version of this effect in this deck. Master Warcraft basically does the same thing as Brutal Horde Chief, in that everything blocks this turn if able, and you can choose how they block. Magnetic Web is it's a pretty funny one. It lets us be a little more choosy if we want only certain creatures to block. So basically, what we have to do is put a magnet counter on Zurgo first, and then start putting other magnet counters on whatever we want to block Zurgo. So then they will be forced to block Zurgo when he attacks. It's a funny old card, and honestly one that probably more people should play in more decks. Invasion Plans. This is another great card that lets us choose how creatures block and also forces them all to block. However, it is symmetrical, so we do need to be a little careful with this one because it has a chance of backfiring on us because all of our creatures will be forced to block, and Zurgo's only indestructible on your turn. So if he had vigilance, which we'll get to that, and his toughness is still really low, which it's liable to be, he starts at 2, it can be a little dangerous. Even more dangerous, most likely, is Cran Melee, which forces all creatures to attack and all creatures to block. This is easily the worst of all of these effects because while we do have some ways to untap creatures that have attacked, if most of the time, they're going to tap, so they won't be able to block. And this also forces all of your creatures to attack too, which we don't always want. So this could be a good one, but if you're trying to make cuts, this would easily be one of the first cards you should cut. Another effect we're going to want quite a few of in the deck is extra combat effects. This is because most of the time we're only going to be able to attack one player with Zurgo, so we're only going to really be able to take care of one person's board, and then we have 2 other players to worry about. What extra combats allow us to do is attack multiple players and have them block with all of their creatures, so we'll have less to worry about. Seize the Day is a pretty typical one. It works pretty good in this deck because it gives Zurgo a little boost, and it only untaps the one creature, but a lot of times Zurgo is the only creature we're going to be attacking with. So it's not too much of a downside, and it can be flashed back, so we can get a double whammy out of it. Hexplate Wallbreaker is an equipment that gives us an extra combat. Also lets us give Zurgo a power boost. And also, we only have to attack to get the extra combat trigger, which is perfect because Zurgo's not always going to be dealing combat damage because we want him to be blocked. So just having to attack to get the extra combat works great. Aki Battle Squad is a funny one because it gives the effect to our modified creatures, basically. And not only do we have a lot of equipment in the deck, which counts as modifying, Zurgo can modify himself with +1/+1 counters. So I think this is just a pretty good one. Probably not needed. This is probably one you could take out if you were making cuts, but I think it's fun enough to try to find a slot for. Ryu Storm's Edge. This one we need to attack with just one warrior or samurai in order to get the effect, because Zurgo is a warrior. But it's free. We don't need to pay any mana for it. It's just there. And another great thing about this is, since it only triggers once, on the second combat, we can attack with all we want. So say we swing with just Zurgo first to clear out all of those blockers, and then Ryu will give us another combat. Well, that person's board has just been cleared of blockers, so now we're going to swing everything at them. A really good card in this deck, and it's also going to come into effect later. You'll see what I mean. Now, sometimes our opponents aren't going to have that many creatures to block with. If they have none, I mean, that's fine. We could just swing in and deal a lot of damage to them. But if we want them to have creatures to block with and they don't have that many, we have a few cards to help with that, namely the Hunted Cycle. So that's Hunted Dragon, Hunted Lamassu, and Hunted Bone Brute. Now, a quick note here. There is one other called Hunted Horror. We do not want to have that one in the deck. And here's why. Even though a 2-mana 7/7 with Trample seems really good, the tokens it gives have protection from black. And that's a problem. That basically means they can just chump block Zurgo forever. So we absolutely do not want that. So as tempting as it seems, we do not want to put Hunted Horror in the deck. Hunted Dragon is probably the best of the three we're going to be including, because not only does it give 3 creatures, they are 2/2s. So 2 times 3, that's 6 toughness. And Zurgo has 7 power. So he's got enough to kill all 3 of them and get 3 counters. Pretty good. Slaughter Specialist gives each of our opponents a puny little 1/1 that'll be easy to kill. And just like Zurgo, it gets bigger when our opponent's creatures die. So it's kind of like a nice little alternative. Clackbridge Troll, again, gives 3 puny little 0/1s, and it's a big 8/8 trample. That'd be nice to swing with. Your opponents could make it so it can't swing by tapping it down, but that's going to cost them a creature, and we get to draw a card in return. I usually don't like to talk about land bases because it's up to the player, but one that I think is really, really good for this deck is Forbidden Orchard. And that's because it comes in untapped, it gives us all the mana we need, and it gives our opponent a small token that they'll have to block with and gives Zurgo a counter. It is a little on the pricey side, so maybe not for everybody, but I'd say if you got it, or if you've got the money for it, it's definitely worth an include. A really funny card that could be lumped into this category is Jangling Automaton. This one's... oh boy, this is a funny one. This is usually a really bad card. When it attacks, our opponent untaps all of their tapped creatures. Now, normally that's something you would definitely not want to do, but in this deck, it kind of works, because if they think their tapped creatures are safe from having to block Zurgo, oh no, we just swing with our Jangling Automaton, and now they got to get in the fray too. Funny card. I just love finding like these old, really bad cards and being able to like actually use them. This is one of the decks where I think this could be used. It's a pretty funny inclusion, and I think it's worth it just for that. We're also going to need alternatives to Zurgo, because Zurgo is very likely going to be a target for removal. And even though he is indestructible on your turn, that doesn't mean he's invincible. Exile is a lot more common these days. Swords to Plowshares is one of the most played cards in the entire format. And he's not indestructible on anyone else's turn. So that's definitely something to worry about. And if he gets too expensive to cast, you need other creatures. And in this case, some great creatures are going to be the Stuffy Doll type of effects. So you've got the original Stuffy Doll, Brash Taunter, Barbed Servitor. These are easily the best because they're all indestructible. And they will, of course, hurt our opponents if they're forced to block it, which They likely will. It's going to be especially bad if we give them Nemesis Mask and they have a lot of creatures. Barb Servitor, if they happen to not block, they can just draw us cards, and that's pretty good. Brash Taunter obviously can fight, so he doesn't even need to attack to be dealing damage. Stuffy Doll is, of course, the worst of them because we can only choose a specific player, but it's still an indestructible blocker, and that's pretty good. There are some other cards like this in Mardu. You have Mog Maniac, Boros Reckoner, Spite Mare. You don't need to include a whole bunch of these. I'd say with the three indestructible ones and maybe two of these at most will be just fine. I personally prefer Mog Maniac and Boros Reckoner because they're cheaper. That's just me. Blazing Sunsteel and Fiend Lash can also make any creature you control a Stuffy Doll, basically. They do basically have the same effect, and this also works particularly well on Zurgo because he can kill all of the creatures and deal a bunch of damage. And there is also some combo potential if you equip them to, like, your Brash Taunter or your Barb Servitor. It's not necessary, but that is a combo you can do if you need an alternate way to win. I generally prefer not to include infinite combos, but it's a thing you can do if you're someone who likes to have an alternate combo win. So, some cards that I think are good for the deck in general, but don't really fit into any of these categories. That's what we're going to talk about here. Brigid, Hero of Kinsbale. She can help Zurgo kill more creatures, because Zurgo isn't always going to have enough power to pick off all of your opponent's creatures. She can help with that by picking off either all the small ones, lower some toughnesses, and actually works really well with our Stuffy Doll effects too, because she'll deal damage to them as well. And it's not going to affect Zurgo because he's going to be indestructible on your turn. And you don't even have to use her for that at all. She could just be a nice little defensive card too. Basilisk Caller, Death Touch effects like that are going to be really important. It'll make it easier for Zurgo to, again, pick off more creatures. Especially since he has 7 power, all you have to do is just assign 1 damage to 7 creatures, and that's 7 counters for you. It's pretty good. Massacre Worm and Insult Intercessor, they will deal 2 damage to your opponents when their creatures die, which we're hopefully going to have happen a lot. Massacre Worm can also make them smaller, which is very good because it'll make them easier to pick off, but also probably a little iffy in a 3-color deck because it's got 3 black pips in its mana cost. It might be manageable, but I would say go for the Intercessor first before Massacre Worm just because it's easier to cast. And another reason I'll mention later. Retribution of the Ancients. This is another interesting one. So Zurgo can give himself a lot of ++1 counters, and so can some other cards like Slaughter Specialist. This can help us pick off some potentially indestructible creatures, or again, shrink some creatures so more can be killed during blocks. It's a pretty funny one, I'd say. Death Tyrant is perfect for this deck because he's going to give us some blockers whenever we kill any of our opponent's blockers. And he can be returned from the graveyard. It's just a fantastic card for this deck. Infiltration Lens, aside from our lore effects, is easily one of the best cards in the entire deck. It'll give us a lot of card draw paired up with our lore effects. And even better, it's a May effect, so if Zurgo's being blocked by 20 creatures, we don't have to draw all those cards. We can just draw a couple. If you do want to draw a lot of cards, might be best to include a Thought Vessel or a Decanter of Endless Water just so you don't have a no max hand size. But you don't need to draw a whole ton of cards with it if you don't want to or don't have one of those effects. And finally, two cards with some funny effects for this deck are Arena and Gopher Blood. So Zurgo's last ability just says damage. It doesn't have to be combat damage, so fight effects work really well with him. Again, like lure effects, fighting is mostly a green ability, but Gopher Blood is just a straight up fight effect in red, and Arena is repeatable, and I think it's a pretty good effect for this deck. Again, it'll get an extra blocker out of the way pretty easily, help give Zurgo a counter for combat. It just works, and it's even instant speed. So as I was putting the list together for myself, I had a little bit of extra room left in the deck, and I was trying to figure out what funny little cards I could include. And I had an idea looking at a lot of them. Assault, Intercessor, Slaughter Specialist, Brutal Horde Chief. What do these cards have in common with our commander? They are all warriors. So I thought, why not throw in a little warrior tribal into the deck? We don't need a lot of other warriors because it's not a full warrior tribal deck, and we don't want to bloat the deck out too much with too many strategies. Just a few of the really good warrior tribal stuff, like Mindblade Render, Raider Spoils. These will draw us cards. Herald of Dramoka, as I've said, Vigilance is pretty important. An Archetype of Aggression, Trample, is nice to have, especially when Zurgo's power is huge. And as just a little added bonus, our opponents can't have Trample. You don't need a lot of warriors, just ones that would be good in the deck. Like already, aside from the warrior tribal synergies. That I think these three will all work fine. And that is it. That is our Zurgo Forced Blocks deck. I'm actually really pleased with how it came out. It was a much deeper rabbit hole than I thought it would be. And when I really started to look through the card pool, I just got more and more pumped about putting the list together, and I think it came out pretty cool. It's a nice little twist on Zurgo, who for a long time has been a pretty homogenous commander. If you want, you could throw in some more board wipes to take more advantage of his indestructibility. I'm only here to make suggestions, not provide a full list. You know, I don't want to tell people what land base to have or what staples to use. You need to play at the power you enjoy and make the necessary upgrades. Me personally, I like to make casual, fun decks. I'm not trying to play something super powerful, just one that can win games but not be oppressive, you know. How you choose to have fun is the important part. Anyway, that's all I got for now. I hope you're happy that I'm back making deck tech videos. Hopefully I'll be back for more. And remember, keep it casual. Massacre Worm and Insult Intercessor. Yes. Massacre Worm and Insult... I did it again! Assault Insert... Fuck, why can't I get that word right? Massacre Worm and Massacre Worm and Assault Inciner... Oh, I'm losing my mind over this. Massacre Worm and Insult... I am losing my mind.